following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to the September 19th, 2013 Town of Cary Planning and Development Committee meeting. To my left is Mayor Pro Tem Gale Adcock. To my right is Councilmember Ed Yerha. To his right is Town Manager Ben Shiver, and I'm Don Frantz. We have one item on consent this afternoon, and it's my understanding that we would like to pull this off consent and hear about it and discuss it. So. With that, I will introduce Mr. Ricky Barker to speak about LDO amendments round 27.
Good evening, Council. This round of amendments includes several things. Item A is downtown housing options, which allow for homes, single-family homes, to be built within historic district areas in the downtown. Also, item B deals with density limits for life care facilities to potentially look at increasing the density within those communities. Public hearing notifications. The General Assembly did grant us the ability to publish the ads on the internet, on our website, and so these are just changes to allow that to occur. Telecommunication and towers and antennas would, another thing from the General Assembly, that whenever you have an existing telecommunication tower, there are certain minor modifications you can make to add some co-locations on there and be okay from the town. The town couldn't deny those applications. Then there are some just some technical corrections that need to be made based on some things that were left out around 26. Also, there is some new information that's not included in the staff report regarding item A, which is downtown housing options. Staff has received information from the staff to the Wake County Historic Preservation Commission regarding the amendment dealing with additional single-family homes on historic landmark properties. And Mr. Roth has stated that he feels like the current Wake County design standards would not allow for an additional home to be built on a landmark property, and that he felt like the commission may not have a basis for issuing a certificate of appropriateness if someone proposed that. And so I want to bring that new information to you to determine whether or not you want to continue this part of the amendment dealing with that.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Mr. Yerha.
Well, concerning Item A, I guess, is
Yes.
the real concern. I don't really have anything to say on B, C, D, or E. I don't know if any of the rest of us do or not. But on item A, I guess it was at our council meeting a month or so ago where I believe it was Mr. Frantz suggested this special use solution, which is what's resulted in this ordinance change. And certainly it's in the right direction from the original proposal. But I believe I was the only one who voted no for it at that time. And I still don't like it, and I would vote no again. I don't know how my colleagues feel. Certainly the letter from, or the conversation with Mr. Roth strengthens, I guess, my feeling. But even without that, I just don't see doing this in our historic district. And as far as, he's of course concerned only with landmarks. To me, our other historic buildings in our historic districts are just as important to me as our landmarks are. Mm-hmm. So I look at the whole, I take what he had said about that and kind of broaden it to all of our buildings. So it's going to be a no. And if we do pass this, let this go through, and we wind up with special use hearings, I'm probably going to be a no vote on all the special use hearings that we have. So I just don't know what the most appropriate or the best time to say no is. Is it now, or is it well, I have to see what the rest of you say, but if it's we have a split decision, I guess this then goes to council discussion at our meeting, whether to have a public hearing.
That's correct.
Probably I'm going to be the only no vote again. I don't know. And it's just going to sort of belabor the whole issue. So I know I'm interested to see how the two of you feel about this.
Okay, Ms. Adcock?
I don't know that you'd be the only no vote, Ed, but I hear what you're talking about in terms of timeline and how much process you want to go through if you believe that the conclusion is foregone.
Right.
Understand that. I have a question, Mr. Barker. Must we have a certificate of appropriateness from the Wake County Historical Preservation Association or Society in order to have a ordinance change such as this, or to build in accordance, or to allow building in accordance with this ordinance change if it were to pass?
According to Mr. Roth, if they do anything to alter that landmark property, they'd have to go through the Historic Commission for approval to do that. So they would have to get that in order to build those homes on the property.
So he's just foreshadowing that they would say no, and then even if we were to pass this ordinance and a property owner with a historic property were to submit a design plan to do this, they'd have to go through them and they'd say no.
Yes, and
I mean, he's just telling us in advance, right?
It's important to note that this is a landmark property, which is different than the property for the other one that's just in the historic district.
Right.
And so the landmark property has a little bit more to it with regard to the building and the land itself. There's also another caveat with this, that on the property, not only is it landmark, but a landmark easement has been given to the capital area historic organization. So that's another thing. If, like, say, well, let's just take some of the land out of that easement, they'd have to get approval from the capital area as well. So that's another hurdle. If they said, well, maybe if the owner said, well, I'll just reduce my landmark property, then they still have to go through Mr. Roth to get that approved. And he wasn't.
Mr. Roth himself, or a committee of people?
Well, it's
I guess it's the board of
that organization.
Yeah, would even make the decision, actually.
It's a different board, though.
Right. It's not the Wake County Commission.
That's right.
Right.
So it might be two steps.
Right. Sounds like a lot of, regardless of whether this ordinance were to get through us, that there would still be hurdles that property owners would have to go through that may not be able to be overcome.
And are totally out of our control.
Oh, yeah, 100%, and the property owners as well. We took this, when it came to us before, to full council because we wanted to get everybody's input on it. What's y'all's sense about that?
I mean, I'm I would like to take it to council, and I would actually like to take it to public hearing to hear what the citizens have to say, hear what the property owner has to say. I'm sure folks like Mr. Roth and others from Capital Area Preservation and possibly Friends of the Page Walker might want to come speak to it as well and, you know, educate us and everybody else. So I would actually like that process to continue and give the property owners and citizens and other interested parties the opportunity to, you know, voice their concerns. I do hear your concerns, Mr. Yerha, and I'm kind of starting to lean towards that. You know, there's definitely a difference between landmark and historic, you know. Historic properties wouldn't necessarily have to go through the Wake County Capital Area Preservation to get their approval, but the landmark properties will. So I kind of...
You know, I'm always in favor of process, and let me tell you why I think this is a really good idea you have. It doesn't obligate us to move forward with the LDO amendment. It allows us an opportunity to hear from all the interested parties to see if there are other things we haven't even thought of. And then to make the decision of whether to go forward, and I would support that,
Yeah, so
actually.
that's kind of where I'm coming from. I hear Mr. Yerha is,
Well, it just goes back to my question, when's the best time to say no?
When's the best time to say
You know,
no?
After
Right.
more public input's what Mr.
Well,
Frantz said.
it's probably the case,
Yeah.
because it would just be more time and aggravation at our next council meeting unless we all agree with this goes on consent, and then you schedule a public hearing, right? And we can speak to it then.
pretty much, but it still has to be voted on at the council meeting on consent, so.
Yeah.
And if someone really wants to, you know, to pull it for discussion and then decide whether it goes to public hearing, they have the right to do that. But, you know, I feel as a group, we always believe more public input is better than less.
And I also think there's value in having others hear a lot of the information and things that might come out at that public hearing, and it might be enlightening for some, and so that's kind of where I'm at.
No, if you're leaning toward my way of thinking overall, I can lean toward your way of thinking here and say, okay, let's go for the
Couple of
public hearing.
leaners over here.
Gotcha.
We can agree, and
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and send this forward on consent then. If one of the other council members has a issue, they can pull it, and we'd be happy to talk about it again, but send this forward for public hearing. Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.
I think it would particularly be good to hear from other citizens of the downtown, whether they live in the historic district or not, as to what they think, because there are a lot of young families down there saying, we're in this for the long haul. Be real curious what they think about that.
Absolutely. First on discussion items is request for a waiver, water line extension to the Rex Fraser subdivision, and we'll hear from Mr. Bailey.
The Rex Fraser subdivision is a new Wake County subdivision that's developing along Yates Mill Pond Road, which is in Swift Creek Land Management Plan area as rural, which means it has to be lower density and also has a restriction preventing it from connecting to sanitary sewer. They have, in some wells they've had on site, have found some arsenic and are requesting they connect to water and be provided water service from the town of Cary. We have extended lines to serve the schools along Yates Mill Pond Road, both Yates Mill Pond Elementary and Swift Creek Elementary. We also had a subdivision, a very small subdivision in between that had individual well failures for arsenic as well, and actually connected, but that was after they had occupied the homes. Staff sees this as a different arrangement for a brand new subdivision, extending our ability to serve an area along a dead-end line, and potentially could start a process where domino effect, where more and more and more of these request water service. So for that reason, staff's recommending denial of the request and not providing water service, and they can proceed with some other method.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Ms. Adcock?
I'm sorry I didn't get in touch with you ahead of time, Mr. Bailey, to ask you for a map. Do you have one for me?
It should be the attachments in the staff report should link you to a map. If not, I have my paper copy.
My request, so I have a request, you know, the letter that they did, but I couldn't find any other attachment.
that's all I could
Oh, there it
find.
is. I'm so sorry. Try page 2. Yeah. So ballpark for me, how big is this? How many?
I counted between 50 and 60 lots.
Okay.
The
Single
text was too
family.
small. I didn't get the exact number, but I counted them
Okay.
while waiting here, and it was between 50 and 60.
Okay, so all single family?
It's all single family, and all be larger lot complying with the Swift Creek land management rules for, impervious would be, I believe, 24% or less, or maybe 12% less, excuse me. But it would comply with Swift Creek land management plan, so larger lots,
Right.
limited impervious.
But a couple other related questions was, how typical is it to drill 2 wells and find low level? I mean, I take it the arsenic levels are low level, but still over the allowable amount. Is it reasonable for them to dig other wells, or is it reasonable to assume that that aquifer under there is all got the same level of arsenic in it?
It would probably be similar. You will need to get a considerable distance away before it would have a significant reduction in the arsenic levels. The subdivision north of the school, which is, the school's a pretty big property, it had arsenic in all the individual wells, and there was 6 or 8 homes in there, but every home had a separate well, and all of them had the same issue. So I expect it's pretty widespread in this area.
Okay, so that, I really appreciate that. And I certainly share the staff's concern about the domino effect, and that there will be, our policy is not to connect people in the county to our water system unless they have failure. But what's this property owner's other option?
If they probably would have a community water system in here, and there is treatment options. You can do ion exchange to remove arsenic. You can also do reverse osmosis to remove arsenic, but it has ongoing maintenance and operation cost and some capital cost that would be reflected through the rates that these homeowners would pay.
But that's a cost that would be borne first by the developer and then passed on to the homeowner, both in terms of initial cost and then, I guess, in terms of a continued cost to them for living there.
Usually when a community water service goes in, they make all the capital cost for the
Right.
future revenue. So the developer doesn't necessarily pay, so it would be all in the rates.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't, I mean, I know it's not our responsibility to fix this problem for the developer. I just wondered if there were reasonable options for them other than connecting to Cary Water and asking us to violate a policy that we have. Those were my questions.
Okay. Do you have any questions, Mr. Yerha?
No, those are good questions, Mrs. Adcock. That was my concern also, whether there were other alternatives that they could do. So the domino effect, I mean, what you're saying really, the downside for us is that we would be using our water supply up on non-Cary residents. Is that the downside? I mean,
Well, that's part of
They're
it,
not
but
even our citizens.
that's the long ways out on our system, and we have to go way outside our corporate limits to maintain these services. When they had a break, we'd have to go out there, changing out meters and customer accounts. We're going that far out. We don't have a lot of changes with the few we have now. The school system's not likely to sell to another entity, so we don't have to change those meters and accounts out, and having continuing effect. But remember, we're already getting about a mile away from our connected water system, and we're on a big dead end. And ultimately, if we keep extending, we're going to need to loop our line around. And that would be a huge capital expense to us to loop our line back to another point in our system to improve or meet our standards for water quality and improve our reliability. If there's just a damage out there and a water line break, then you would have all those 55 homes out of service. And the further we go down Yates Mill Pond Road, the more likely those things could happen.
it's good information. That makes it a lot easier.
I would concur. While I feel for the potential future residents out in this area, it's just not in Cary taxpayers' best interest to, run water lines a mile out of our jurisdiction to serve them. And even if the developer or whoever, or the residents were to pay for all that pipe and stuff on the front end, we still have the ongoing maintenance costs and stuff associated with it. So I would support staff recommendation to deny it.
I agree.
Same here.
Okay, sounds like we are all in agreement. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Next up is potential amendments to the architectural design standards, and we'll hear from Mr. Ricky Bacher again.
Okay. As you may recall, the town council requested the staff evaluate changes to our architectural design standards regarding the painting of masonry materials on buildings. It's important to note that this topic deals with a town-wide standard It does not deal with a specific case or any buildings in the town. So our discussion today only focuses on that standard. This standard was adopted in 2005 and does not allow the painting of masonry materials on buildings. They must remain in their natural state. In the report, the staff provided 3 options for you to consider, along with the pros and cons of each of those options. Option 1 would allow any masonry material on buildings to be painted. And although the current standard would be removed with this option, there's another town standard that would require the paint color to be used to be compatible with the surrounding area. So that still could remain with that option. Option 2 would allow masonry materials to be painted on less visible sides like the rear or the side where it's not along a main roadway or a pedestrian way. This option would also require the paint color on those sides to match or be compatible with the masonry color of the non-painted side. And then option 3 would just leave the requirement as it is today with no painting or coloring of masonry materials. And of course, there could be a variety of options and council would choose. You can choose one of these or another option. For example, you could just allow painting within the town center district. Overall, the staff does not support the painting of masonry materials on buildings. We believe there are good reasons for that standard, particularly with regard to upholding our high aesthetic standards in the town. Staff has also received information from a representative from the Brick Industrial Association. Says painting brick is not a good idea if you're trying to remedy a mortar or brick that needs repair. He also said that painting a brick also may cause damage by trapping moisture behind the brick and mortar that could damage the building. However, staff believes there should be some flexibility in some cases to paint masonry materials. And so we're recommending option 2 because that would be allowing painting on non-visible sides so the main visible sides would remain in their natural state. Also, the least visible sides would be painted to be compatible with the brick, so there wouldn't be a lot of effort for us to decide what color to use on those 2 sides. Another thing to consider, if you want to, you can adopt an interim change right now, and then staff would go into, we have funded a comprehensive update of our building design standards, and we can explore this further with that as well. So, and that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Questions, comments?
Review the temporary part again.
Well, we have funding to update our building design standards, and you could choose one of these options as a temporary solution, and as we go through that process, we can explore it a lot further and have more public input, and then try to bring it back to you later on.
But that temporary ordinance will become effective once adopted at the next council meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Because this is within our community appearance manual, not in the town code or the zoning ordinance. So it's something you do not have to have a public hearing to change.
Okay, and it's something that could, if we did make a change, could occur at the next council meeting with the understanding it could change again.
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Adcock?
I feel like it's a moving target. I just got to, so I wasn't, it was for information. But it seems to me if we change it and then we turn around and change, then, there's some buildings that would get in during the change and then others wouldn't be held the same standards. So I'm not going to speak in favor of a temporary change, but it is some other questions.
Sure.
And for one thing, I'd really like to see the letter from this gentleman sometime. Doesn't have to be tonight. Mm-hmm. The gentleman you
Sure.
Quoted here, Eric Johnson. I think it'd be good for us to just kind of see that. And as I think about buildings that whose owners might want to paint them anywhere, much less downtown, I think about, this speaks to like trying to restore or somehow shore up crumbling masonry, okay? So I understand that. So there are people who are trying to keep the building from deteriorating. But it would seem to me, the same way one paints their house because they want it to look different, that there may be people who want to paint their buildings not because the mortar's in bad shape
Sure.
or the brick, but they just want a different look. This doesn't speak to that.
Sure.
So I totally get if your masonry's falling and crumbling, you don't want to paint. But what about just for appearance sake? So that's one question I have that I don't think so covered in here, and I'm not sure that we've actually discussed. Because what looked good in 1970, think about it, certainly doesn't look good today in many cases.
It all comes back in style.
Yeah, if you can wait that long. Talking about bell bottoms? Okay. So that's my one of my thoughts. And the other is, if we were to state that the color to paint the building would need to be basically the same as the color of the brick, or as close as is possible through chemistry, why not allow all sides to be painted? What's the logic of only allowing two sides to be painted if it's all going to be the same color as the brick? I realize it wouldn't have the lines, the mortar lines, but that's just a thought I had.
Sure.
Those are really I feel like we're solemn being asked to split the baby here, I really am. But,
I could speak to those if you'd like.
yeah, that would help a lot.
Okay. So with regard to the first one, regarding the painting of the building, just because people want a different look, I guess it just goes to the overall policy of the town, whether or not they feel like that the masonry materials presents a more aesthetically pleasing community. And so from a staff standpoint, we think that's the case. We also think that one of the purposes of not painting buildings is there is a maintenance issue that arises as soon as you paint buildings, that, they could, come into disrepair if they're not painted regularly. So again, it gets back to a policy decision by council. What do you want to do preference-wise? And I understand, that's not something that it's more kind of just a policy that you want to set for your town. The second one deals with I'm sorry, what was the second one again?
Oh, it was the rationale and logic of allowing
Oh, yes, okay.
two sides, or the sides that were not on the
Sure.
pedestrian side and not on the main road side, they could be painted, but the more forward-facing sides could not.
I think that
If
might
they're
have to
all
do with potentially resolving violations that might occur, in the sense that there may be people that inadvertently paint all the building, and then we say, well, do we want to have them go and, use the expense of taking all the paint off all sides of the buildings? Or could there be some flexibility in some cases to allow certain non-visible sides not as visible sides to remain painted? One of the reasons, that's one of the reasons for that, as well as by allowing it to be painted the same color, we're trying to allow the flexibility to address maybe violations or resolve something, but also provide a potential disincentive for people to paint buildings, because why would people want just to paint buildings to just refresh it if it's going to be the same color? So, that's one.
Oh, it's a disincentive.
It's a disincentive, so
Why
so
bother?
it's something that staff doesn't like to see or wouldn't want to see buildings painted. However, if it happens, then maybe this could be a solution. So.
Would you allow me to keep the floor?
Keep going.
Thanks. Okay, so let me follow up. First of all, thank you very much.
Sure.
You talked about the upkeep of painted brick buildings. And pardon me for not being as familiar with the community design appearance manual as obviously you are. But what about buildings that are currently painted that are not brick? What requirements do we have that they're not chipped and peeling, and that their appearance and upkeep are not to our standards? I mean, do we issue a notice of violation if someone's painted building, non-masonry painted building, is not kept in good shape? I'm trying to figure out why we're more worried about, if you get past the whole painted brick thing, the whole worry about upkeep, if we're not holding the same standard we'd hold someone with a painted building that was non-masonry?
I think there is more potential for a masonry material to have more moisture behind it
Because it's trapped?
and cause more peeling and paint, and that's, causing the need to paint it more frequently.
Which is the property owner's
It would
issue,
be.
right?
It would be. It's just one of those things that's more of another thing to add to potential maintenance of the town if that was a issue that started popping up, that people are saying, man, these buildings are looking in bad shape, paint's peeling off, we need to go and police that, so.
So if you let me have the floor one bit longer, the only thing I'd say is I guess I'm just not as averse to painted brick as some people are. I live in a neighborhood where there's a lovely painted brick home for 20 years. Now, they just put siding up, of course, but for 20 years that house was painted and it looked nice. And so maybe I'm missing the point about the aesthetic. I think when a property owner anywhere is trying to improve the appearance of their property, to either update it or, not to fix it, not to almost use it as a way to not fix an underlying problem, like crumbling mortar. But it's an appearance thing. I don't know if I feel real strongly that that's a bad thing to do, downtown or anywhere. And I will say that I think if you have two sides of a building, and let's say they're obviously probably going to be at right angles to each other, and the other two non-painted are the other two right angles, that's going to look unusual because you've got two sides that show the mortar lines and two sides that don't. So it's going to look pretty unusual. Anyway, I have a hard time picturing that looking really good. I'm done.
Mr. Yerha.
Firstly, to clarify, the standards that we have now apply to non-residential and attached residential.
That's
So
right.
it doesn't apply to a single-family home.
That's correct.
Oh, I know. I was just using that as an
Just
example.
wanted to make sure of that.
Yeah.
I frankly like our standards the way they are right now, without any changes. But certainly, I'm looking at option 2 to see what's good and what's bad. And I think the worst thing about it is that it's going to confuse the public more than they're already confused, with these standards. And that to me is the major con here. And I know we're not talking about specific buildings here. We're talking about an ordinance, but
Sure.
if you're talking about the sides of the buildings that are not adjacent to main roadways or pedestrian ways. So let's just say hypothetically, we had a building on the corner of Academy and Chatham, and they wanted to paint the Academy side. I mean, that's a main pedestrian way or walkway. So this really wouldn't help that property owner
That's correct.
if there were such a property owner
That's right.
in that case. Right. So, I mean, personally, I like to keep things the way they are, so I would go with option 3, and certainly if you're going to have an update of the whole architectural design component later this year, obviously this would be something you could look at again and maybe come up with something else and maybe more detail, and we worry about it then. So for me, I would say the interim would be stay with option 3, do nothing, and discuss it again later this year when you look at the community appearance manual. That'd be my opinion.
Good points and comments all around. I tend to agree with Ms. Yerha on option 2. It's kind of half, I want to use a word, but I shouldn't use a word. It doesn't really solve the problem. Either do number 3 or you do number 1. Either say you can paint the building or you say you can't paint the building. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I agree with your comments. Painting two sides of a building and not painting the other two, that doesn't really make any sense to me. And agreed, it would be confusing. People, can I paint it? Can I not paint it? Well, why didn't you paint the whole thing? So I tend to lean towards option 1. Personally, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of painted brick, although there are plenty of cases where it does look beautiful. There's a white house off of Harrison Avenue and Park Street that's got white brick, looks gorgeous. And then and then I've got a Burger King across the street over my neighborhood that's painted brick, and I can't stand it. So, but at the end of the day, it's not my building. I would hope that our other standards and guidelines ensure that should a building be painted, that it's up to the highest quality and design and, you know, colors and everything else that we regulate in this town. But I don't know that we ought to prohibit it outright. But I don't believe that option 2 is a compromise. So I would tend to go with option 1. But regardless, it sounds like we are not in agreement, and looks like this one is going to council for discussion. Ms.
Oh, I would agree. Can I,
Please.
at the risk of taking too much time? I think option 1 should be seriously considered. I think that if we have either in our current community appearance manual, or can put in there issues about maintenance, or issue about appearance once something's painted, and I don't care if it's brick or not, it's appearance after it's painted, color approval. I think that is where the quality control comes in. So, because we already talk about you can't have high impact colors on in other ways. I think there's a way to control this without limiting property owners to a sincere desire to improve the appearance of their building. And rather than reface or re-brick a building, sometimes painting may be the best option if it's not an attempt to simply cover, put lipstick on a pig kind of thing. So I agree this should go to council for a conversation, because I feel quite sure that's maybe not be the majority opinion at this point.
Wow. Okay.
It's worth the conversation.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Yerha?
Yeah, no, we have a difference of opinion, so
Okay.
let's send it on.
Awesome. All right, well, this will go to council
Thank
meeting
you.
for discussion. Thank you, Ricky. And let's see here, last but not least, Comprehensive Transportation Plan Amendment for Bamberg Lane, Orchard Knoll Drive, and Law Draker Drive. And we'll hear from Mr. Toddell.
Yes, before you tonight, you have consideration of a request to amend the collector system shown in our comprehensive transportation plan in the southern planning jurisdiction of Cary. At the June 27th meeting of council, you all directed staff to investigate this amendment to the CTP. The council had received earlier a petition from the residents representing Surrey Point and Orchard Knoll subdivisions requesting the removal of Bamberg Lane, Orchard Knoll Drive, and Law Draker Drive as future collector streets from the CTP. Residents cited concerns about that the collector street designations would make it difficult to sell their homes, change the character of their neighborhood, and would be detrimental to area water quality. Since the 2001 CTP, these 3 streets have been designated as future collector streets, not avenues, on existing unincorporated local streets in Wake County subdivisions. Similar collector streets and interconnections are also shown in the Wake County collector street plan that was done in 2004 for this same area and shown in attachment C. The interconnections of this collector system link the 3 streets across the Singletary property, which is a 165-acre undeveloped parcel that lies between the 3 neighborhoods. In our LDO, we have outlined standards of review for comprehensive plan amendments, such as this proposed amendment. Staff's observation is this request does not meet any of those standards. The plan collector street system, as shown, meets the criteria set forth in our CTP, our land development ordinance, and our collector street policy. If the sites were to be redeveloped, not if they were to be as they currently are, there wouldn't be any improvements on them. The existence of collector streets designations have no impact on the rights or activities of existing homeowners and property owners or the building improvements they want to do on their properties, nor does it require street improvements if any of the homes are sold or any improvements are made on those homes individually. The town does not have any committed or identified funding in the capital improvement budget or any jurisdiction to alter or improve these subject streets, and the town collector street policy actually dictates that the town does not build collector streets, that they're built by developers. The streets would not be required to be improved unless these communities were voluntarily annexed, rezoned, and redeveloped. That concludes my summary of the staff report. Staff requests that council provide, that you all provide direction of an appropriate course of action on the issue. Appropriate courses include directing staff to evaluate the area collector street network as part of the community plan update process and the CTP update, which is currently underway. Tabling the request and allowing for consideration of the alternatives or removal of the streets in conjunction with the next CTP amendment that does meet the standards of review, or initiating a comprehensive plan amendment process to consider alternatives or removal of the streets.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Questions, comments?
You always do, but I'll yield the floor to Mr. Yerha if he wants to go first.
Well, no, my only comment, I guess, is that we have, and you've said it here too, there are approximately 24 similar cases in the town's planning jurisdiction. I don't see why this is a lot different than a lot of other collector streets that we have. I don't see this rising to the top of having to do anything other than that we were requested, by the residents there to do it. So I was, wasn't even sure I really wanted to study it, to be honest with you, at that meeting. I think I voted to direct you to look at it, but.
You have the memory of an elephant.
But I don't.
Remember everything.
Thank you.
That's a compliment.
I personally don't see the need to take any real action here. Of course, we have to look at your 1, 2, 3 recommendations there, but just make some comments before we get to that point. I just don't see it as anything that we need to do. I don't know why this is special.
I think that was an excellent point, Mr. Yerha. There's so many similar, I forgot the number you used, 36?
24.
24, okay, it was a round number, multiple of 12. They're similar to this, and what makes this so special? Well, what makes this so special is that the citizens actually requested this. That's the only thing I know of. And so the question becomes, do you do it or not do it? If you say no, fine. If you say yes, that's when. Do you initiate the process now, or do you wait and do it in a comprehensive fashion? One of the things I think I heard Todd explain, and good job in reviewing the staff report, is that there are a lot of other things that would have to happen first before these things would even come to fruition. One is they'd have to be annexed. They have to ask for that by current law. And then it would have to be developed. So that could be 20 years from now. So there, as you say, Mr. Yerha, no rush whatsoever to do anything about this. There is plenty of time to handle it at such time as these citizens say, please make us Cary citizens. And then you'd still have plenty of time before they got developed. So kind of in favor of not doing anything with it. I think it was great to get this report. I do think it was a good idea to look at it. But I think the staff's report really points out that there's no immediacy to this, other than I'm sure it feels differently to the people who live in these homes. But in terms of what we would have to go through, meaning you, staff, I sense, I get no sense of immediacy.
Good comments from both of you. I would tend to agree. I do appreciate staff time, effort, and energy to look at this. We asked you to do it, and you did a good job, so thank you. After reading the staff report, I too was kind of like, what makes this one special? And I appreciate the comments and the concerns of the folks that came and spoke to us and asked us to do this, but we just don't see a pressing need or anything that makes this one rise to the level, of urgency. So I too would follow along, do nothing. So I think we're all in agreement, do nothing.
So is that option 1 or 2? I guess 1, huh?
Well, I'm always in favor of do no harm. We can do no harm by leaving things as they are. And at such time that these folks want to be annexed, they can ask us this again.
So we would create an option 4, do nothing.
Well, if
We'd say except as information and take no action, I guess, is.
typically with option A, that's what we look at all the collector streets across the whole town during a CTP update and look at if there's ways we should improve it or doing things. So it will be looked at no matter what in terms of
Right.
reevaluation when we do the CTP
Right,
update.
of course.
But we're not actually going to table the request. We're going to say, this is just going to be done as part of the whole evaluation process, and it doesn't stand out as a request hanging out there.
Right.
So I'd, go forward with the a planned process, I guess is what we're saying.
Continue to
Special
review
action.
all of the town's transportation as we always do, I guess.
Right.
But take no further specific action on this specific request.
That's what, yes, sir.
And that would be A, so.
Okay.
Whatever you say, Todd.
We have 1, 2, 3, so
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I'm
have-
sorry.
One.
That'd be 1, I'm sorry, 1.
we'll call it 1A. Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
And that concludes tonight's meeting. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.